Hello everyone, I'm Professor DK and welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to do something interesting. So we will be visiting the old video that we had done, the simple login app tutorial that we had done in the older version of Android Studio 2.3.3. And as you can see, it's been quite some time now. It was done on July 23rd, 2017. So it's been 3 years to be precise, and the reason I'm doing this video again is because some of you told that you're facing errors when you run it on the latest Android version, and a lot of things have changed. So I'll be doing this video on the latest Android version, and that version, to be precise, is 3.6.3. And not only that, we'll be doing a couple of other interesting things. We'll be looking at how you can work on this code and make it a lot better using classes and hash maps, and we'll be looking at how you can create multiple user logins and also how you can store those user logins in an offline database. So this is going to be a 5-part series on the simple login app, which we had already done. And since it was only a single video long back, and the comments and the support that it has received was overwhelming, and I thought why not just address all the comments in a particular series that all of you love, and that is what we'll be doing today. So this is what we had done in that particular video. Let me just show that. So we had basically created a username and a password field, and when the user clicks on login, it takes you to the other activities. And in case the password or the username is wrong, then the attempts counter is decremented, and this basically gives you 5 attempts, after which the login button is disabled. So this is the overall idea of how the app works. So in essence, what we'll be taking away from this series is going to be how you can use classes, how you can use hash maps, how you can create multiple user logins, how you can store this user credentials in your offline database. Okay, so this will be the takeaway from the project, and although the final demo is still going to remain the same, you would have learned a lot more concepts by the end of it, and I assure you that these concepts are very helpful in the world of Android or Java, and it will help you in creating more advanced applications. Okay, so I have spoken a lot. Let's get into creating an app. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is create your new Android Studio project, and we'll be choosing the empty activity, and you can name it whatever you want, but I'm just going to call it the login application, and I will be using Java as the language, and you can choose the minimum SDK to whatever API version you want to support. But as you can see, by default it says API 16, and all the devices mostly are above that, and it will show you a small info message here saying that this application will basically run on 99.8% of devices if you support the minimum SDK level of API 16. Okay, so let me just choose the defaults and click on finish. You will notice that once your project opens up, it will have this progress bar at the bottom, which shows you what is happening, what are the processes that it's running in the background. And before you begin anything, you must ensure that the Gradle build, which is the background process, completes, and you have all the files required to build your application. And in case you get any errors here at this point, Android Studio is going to basically tell you what you need to do. It will offer you suggestions on how you can fix that. So go ahead and do that, and once you have all the necessary files and libraries, then you will see that the Gradle build will finish successfully, and that's what you need to get before you start on any Android application. So as you can see, my Gradle build was successful, and you will see all the files here. And in case you have some other setting here other than Android, then make sure you choose Android, because that's a better way of organizing your files and viewing them in this particular workspace directly here. Okay, so click on main activity, and you should be seeing this particular file here, and the first thing you'll want to open is the activity main.xml file, and this is the layout file, if you want to call it an alternate name. So you will find it under resources and under layout subdirectory. If you click on activity main.xml, that's how you will find this file. As you can see, it comes preloaded with something called hello world, and that's a text view, and you can just go ahead and delete it because we don't want that. We want to add our own widgets here, so I've deleted it. And the things we need here are an edit text. So go to text here. So here you can choose based on your requirement how the edit text should look like. So in case you're asking for an email and a password, then you can probably choose email. But in case you want to just go for a username, right, so then you can just choose plain text. And I'm going to do the username and password combination in this particular example. So I have dragged the plain text into this layout, and you can go ahead and constrain it on all four sides by just clicking on this circle and then dragging this arrow on all four sides of the layout. Okay, and once you have constrained it on all four sides, then you'll be able to move it as per requirement here. And I'm just going to place it somewhere here so that it looks aligned properly when all the other elements are added. Okay, the first thing you're going to do before you add the other elements is make sure you have configured all the parameters right. And there's one thing that I do when I name a particular widget. I add the prefix of what the widget is in the ID. So since this is an edit text, the way I name the ID is I just say ET, and then I'm gonna call it ET username or probably name, right? So then press enter. And once you have that entered, you can then go ahead and also remove the text, because this text is something you will see when you run the app. So you will see the text name written on this particular edit text, and you don't want that. But instead of having the text, you can have it under hint. So what happens there is you can probably type in enter name as well, because that's more intuitive. Instead of having it as a text, you can see that it's now highlighted in gray color, and it basically provides the user with the hint. And when the user clicks on this particular field, then you no longer see the hint, but it lets you type in the letters. So that is better than having the text here. And some things that are different in this particular version are, you will see that under text you'll have these two different fields. So what is the difference between this particular text field and this particular text field, which has a spanner symbol before it, right? So the use case here for having this particular functionality is, let me type in username and click enter, and you will see that I'm able to see username mentioned here in the edit text. But now if I go ahead and run the app, then I don't see this particular text in this field. That's because this is just a preview field for you to get a sense of how the text will look like when the app runs. But unless you specify the particular string in this other text field, it's not going to be visible when you run the app. So this is kind of a preview if you want to have a simpler definition for what this is. So this is more like a preview that you can have before you run the app, and you can use either of them. But mainly if you want to see something when you run the app, then you will use the Android text field and not the tools text field. Okay, hope that is clear. And I do not want to change anything else here. I'm just gonna go to password. So I'm going to drag and drop the password edit text here, and I'm going to constrain it again on all four sides. But this time remember that since you already have another widget, I'm going to align this newer widget with the old one, and as you can see I constrained it with that. And for the rest of it, it's going to be the same. I constrain it on all the other three sides. Okay, so then I can move it around and I can play with where I want it to be. And once I have it at the right position, I can just click outside. Okay, so I have the password field as well, and again I'm going to name it as ET password. And you can use any naming scheme. That's just the naming scheme I follow. And under hint, just type in enter password. Okay, and press enter. So now that we have the edit text, we need a button. So drag and drop the button onto the layout, and we're going to follow the same steps that we did for the previous widget. So we constrain the top to the previous widget here, and then the three sides to the parent layout. Okay, And once you do that, you will see it's very easy to then align it with respect to the other widgets in your layout. Now for the button, I'm going to name the ID as BTN and I'm going to call it as BTN login. Click enter, and then under text you can go ahead and type in login. Now you can type in login here as well, and probably you can remove the login for the text field, the other text field, the Android one. And you will notice that when you run the app, although it shows here as login, when you run the app you don't see login. Okay, so this is just something for preview, and you need to change it in the Android text field. So I have it as column and I have set the ID. That's all you need for now. And next, for the text view, to display the number of attempts left, I'm going to use the text view. I just drag it and again place it onto the layout and follow the same routine. I am just going to constrain it on all the three sides, with the top being constrained to the previous element. Okay, so once I do that, I then go to the ID. I just since it's a text view, I call it TV, and then for the description of what this does, that is attempts counter, so I'm going to say attempts info. All right, so TV attempts info, and I'm going to change the text here. Instead of saying text view, I'm going to say number of attempts, number of attempts remaining, and I'm going to put a colon and a space, and then I'm going to type in 5. So you can determine how many attempts you want for the user to have, and in this case I'm going to put in 5. So we have our layout ready. Now you can run the app and you will see that this particular activity is loaded with this layout, but then if you click or enter the details, it's all good, but it does not do anything. So the functionality aspect of Android is done in the Java file, and the way you do it is, so go to main-activity.java. This is the respective Java file for activity main.xml, and the way you basically understand which XML layout is linked to the Java file is basically to come into the onCreate function in the particular Java file and see which layout file is being loaded. Okay, so as you can see, set content view is set to load the layout of activity main. So that way you know that main-activity.java is basically interacting with the activity main.xml layout. Okay, so first thing you'll need to do is define all the elements of the layout. So first we have the edit text. So type in edit text, and then you're going to type in the name for your variable. Okay, now for better understanding what I'm writing here and to distinguish between the other variables, for all the elements which come from the UI, I like to prefix them with an E, and here I'm going to prefix E and type in E name, and same goes for password as well. So I'm going to call it E password, and here you'll notice that even though I have written edit text, I see a particular error. It says that I don't have this library. What you need to do is you will need to place the cursor either to the end of the line or the next line, and then you will see it prompts you to enter Alt Enter. So you can go ahead and click Alt Enter, and it's gonna import these libraries into your Java file, and you can see that here I have this library imported. Okay, you will see the error if I again go ahead and remove this. So again you see the same error, and if I go ahead and click Alt Enter, it's automatically going to import those particular widget libraries into your Java file. Okay, so I have my elements defined, but since I do not want any other Java files to access these elements, I'm going to make it private. Okay, so this is an access modifier which you use in Java. So if you use public, then you basically say that this particular variable can be accessed from all the other files. If you set it to private, then only this particular class can access these variables. So that's what these access modifiers do. Okay, and I know that some of you are just starting with Android Studio, and if you have no prior knowledge of Java, that's completely okay, because here what I preach on my channel is to learn something by creating, and that's I think the faster way of learning stuff, and that's what I would like all of you to do. by creating. Even though you do not know anything, it's perfectly fine, but at the end of this particular series, I can guarantee you that you would have learned so much more. Okay, so now for the text view, let's the next thing is the button. So private button, and again I'm going to click Alt Enter, and I'm going to call it as E-login, and the same thing goes for the text view as well. Okay, I'm going to call it as attempts info. So once you have the UI elements defined, you need to bind them to the XML layout, and the way you do it is we have a particular function called find view by id. So you take the variable name that you defined and you just do a find view by id, and r.id.et name is gonna connect your XML layout with the variable that you just defined. Okay, so now the question you're gonna ask me is what is this particular line doing, right? So when you say find view by id, here you're trying to attach the particular variable to its particular XML element, and this et name is the name that we have given for the enter name edit text which are defined in the layout, as you can see here, and we want this ename variable to be attached to that. So that's what we are doing here. Okay, now in case you see errors here, then you can typecast it as well with the edit text. So you can do this in case you see errors, but in the latest Android Studio this is not required because it automatically takes care of doing that for you. But yeah, for some of you who see that error, you can do this. Okay, so let's proceed. Next, we're going to do the same for all the variables. Okay, so now that we have defined all our variables and then binded them with their respective XML layout elements, the first thing you're going to do is set an on-click listener on the button. Okay, so the way this app works is when the button is clicked, we are going to check if the credentials are right, and then if the credentials are right, we then allow the user to enter the app. If not, we decrement the number of attempts remaining, and then once you are out of attempts, we disable the button. So the first thing you need to do is set an on-click listener on the button. So what is this on-click listener I keep talking about? It's basically checking if there is an on-click attempt made on the button. If someone tries to click, what needs to happen is what you need to define. And the way you do it in Android is you take the particular variable which we defined for the button, which is e-login, and then I want you all to type the same way I'm doing here, because this part is something which is tricky and most of you get it wrong. So set on click. Once you type these 3 words, you will notice that you have this auto suggestion saying set on click listener, and I'm going to click enter, and inside this you will need to do new, again type in on click, and by now you should see the view.onClick listener being suggested at the top, and once you click on enter, all of the code is automatically generated for you. So here most of you go wrong, although you can type this entirely on your own manually, but then I would prefer that you use the auto suggestion feature, because there could be some errors that you can make when you type in certain things. So better is you use the autocomplete feature and type in exactly the way I did, so that you don't get any kind of error. Okay, so once the button is clicked, what needs to happen? You first need to get the name that was entered by the user. So let me just create a string variable, and let's call it as input name, and you will need to get it from the edit text field, right? And the variable is ename. So you just say ename dot get text. That's going to get the text that was input by the user, but then you will need to convert it into a string. Okay, so whatever is input by the user, we convert it into a string, because the variable that we have defined is a string, and we have it in input name. Same goes for input password as well. So we create a new variable string, and then we just choose ePassword dot get text dot to string. Okay, it's very simple, and now the next question you're going to ask me is, how do I know what functions to use, right? Now this is something you will get to know once you keep developing more and more applications, but for now just understand that in Java or in Android specifically, everything has its library already defined, right? If you want to do something like change something to uppercase or lowercase, then note that you have libraries already available and everything is as the name suggests. So in case you want to get text from this particular edit text, then you can just type in get and you can see what are the functions available. For example, if I say ename dot get, if I type in, you will see the list of functions which are available for this particular widget, and you can use that. Okay, so use the autocomplete feature to the fullest to get an idea of what functions are allowed on this particular widget. Okay, so now that you have the input name and the password, you need to check if the user has actually input something or not. And the way you do it is you have the input name dot is empty. So this is a function you can use to check if there is any input or not, and we'll use the or here to check if the password field is empty or not. Okay, so if the input name and the password is empty, then you're going to display a message. Let's display an error message, and you can use toast for it. So toast is used to display simple messages and for any events that occur in the activity. So the first parameter is the context, which is this, and the second parameter is the string. And here you'll be typing the error message. You can say, please enter all the details correctly. Okay, anything you want. And then the final thing is to set the duration. So type toast dot, and then you will see the list of options. So length, short, and length, long. So you can choose based on the duration you want. So length short is for a shorter duration, and then outside the curly brackets you need to type in dot show. Okay, so you have the toast ready, but then if you see an error here, it basically means that it's not able to get the context. So just go ahead and type in main activity dot this, and you should see the error getting resolved. Okay, so if there is no input, we just show an error message to the user, and if not, then we proceed to validate the credentials. Okay, now to validate the credentials, you will actually need a particular string to compare with, and let's go ahead and create that here. So private string, let's call it as username, and we'll give it the value of admin, and again do the same thing for the password, and we'll give it 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 as the value. So only when the user enters admin and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, that's when you'll allow the user to enter your app. Okay, so how do you validate it, right? The easiest way to do that is create a function which does that, because you can organize stuff in a very neat way when you write code. It is more readable. So create a function, and since it returns true or false, so if the credentials are right, you return true, or else false. So it's very simple. Use boolean, and then we'll name this function as validate, and it takes two inputs, so string name and string password, and then you'll need to define how this logic works, right? So inside here, you need to compare with the strings that we have defined, right? So if name dot equals, so when you type in eq, you will notice that there are two options here. You can either use equals or equals ignore case. Equals is case sensitive, where if you type in admin in caps, then basically it's not going to work. You will need to type in admin the exact same way I defined here. But in case you use equals ignore case, then you can basically forget about any case sensitivity in the string. So I'm going to use equals because that makes more sense when you have any kind of credentials being checked. Okay, so equals the username, and we'll use the AND operator because here we need to make sure that both the password and the username matches and not just one of them, right? So equals password, and only when these two strings match we're going to return true, and for all other cases you're going to return false. So make sure you type in return false outside the if loop, and that's all. So it's that simple to do a string match in Android. So what do you do in the else condition here? So you'll need to validate the credentials. Let me just go ahead and create a variable here. So it will be a Boolean variable. So let's call this flag as is valid, and by default let's give it a false value. So is valid is equal to, it's going to use the validate function, and you'll notice that this particular function is not highlighted yet because it's not being used, but once you type in validate, then it's going to get highlighted, and you'll need to provide two parameters. One is name and password, and that is going to be input name and the input password. Okay, so you have a Boolean which is going to either be false or true based on the credentials that we input. Now in case it is false, so what do you do? So is valid. Note that I have an exclamatory mark at the beginning because it's basically gonna invert the input that we have. So in case it is false, then in case it is false, then you would want to decrement the counter and disable the button. So for that you will need a counter as well. So private int counter, and we'll give it a value of 5, and if it is not valid, you will need to decrement the counter. So counter minus minus, and the next thing you're going to do is display a message saying that the credentials were incorrect. So copy the same toast message that you had defined earlier, and then here just change the message saying incorrect credentials entered. Okay, anything you want. And then the next thing I'm going to do is also check if the counter value is 0. So if counter is equal to 0, then you will also want to disable the login button. So the login button is the variable e-login. So e-login dot set enabled, and you will need to give the value as false. Okay, so when you say set enabled is false, so then it gets disabled. Okay, so this is a logic for when the credentials are wrong. Now what if the credentials are right? So that comes in the else condition, and what you would want to do is display a message saying all the login was successful. So change the message again, login was, or just say login successful, right? And next thing you want to do is send the user to your home page or the new activity. So add the code to go to new activity. So I'm going to add the comment here right now because we don't have an activity yet, because we have only one single activity right now. So how do you create your new activity? So go over to Java and then your main package application, the first folder you see here, and then right click it, and you will notice a new prompt. Right click it, and then you will see new, then go to activity and again choose an empty activity. This time I'm going to name this as homepage activity because it's the homepage of our application. So again, same options, we are not going to change anything here, and then click on finish. It's going to take some time to create the application, and once the application is complete, then you will be seeing the homepage activity.java and also the XML file. And in this XML file, let's go ahead and just give it a text view so that we can see something when we go into this activity. And let's again follow the same things that we did for our first activity. So constrain it on all 4 sides since this is the first widget, and also give it some ID. So TV second activity, or let's just say TV welcome. Okay, so text view welcome. So here under text we'll type in welcome to the new activity. Okay, so click enter. So this is what you'll see when the login is successful. Okay, so we have defined the layout here, and since we are not doing anything with this particular layout, we are just going to display this message. You don't really have to do anything in the .java file, and you can just go ahead to main activity.java and redirect the user to this new activity. So the way you do it is you create an intent. So use intent. This is the object of this particular class, and then you say new intent, and inside this you will need to specify the source and the destination. So main activity.this, and the destination is going to be the new activity that you want to go to, and that is home page activity, and you're going to say .class. Okay, so you have your intent ready, and the way you start the new activity is you call in start activity function, and you will need to pass in this new intent object that you created. So it basically is very simple. It uses a source and the destination, and then it takes the start activity function, which uses the parameter of that particular intent you defined to go to that new activity. So we have added the code to go to the new activity, but one thing that I did forget is, so we have the attempts info. We'll need to update this to show the number of attempts remaining. So I completely forgot about that, and right now if you go to activity.main, you will see that it says number of attempts remaining is 5. We'll need to change that whenever there's an incorrect login. So for that, go ahead into the if condition, and then just use the attempts info variable, and then you're going to say set text, and we'll need to type in the exact text that we used for the text view. So just go ahead and copy this, or you can type it as well. So just paste it here, and instead of saying 5, you delete that, and then you concatenate it with the counter. So the counter holds the value of the present number of attempts remaining. So you can just go ahead and concatenate it with this. So at this point we are ready to run our application. So just go ahead and connect your phone. So once you connect your phone, you're going to see it here at the top, and then you can just click on run, and that's going to load the entire application onto your phone. Now if it's the first time that you're running this application on the phone, then it's going to take some time, but on subsequent runs it will be faster. Okay, so when you run the app, you'll notice that it says enter name, and if I go ahead and type in admin, you'll see that the hint disappears. And here let me just type in the correct credentials this time. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 is the password we have entered. So I'm going to type that in and click on login. You'll notice that I'm in the new activity. Now if you didn't notice it the first time, at the bottom you'll see the login successful message. And in case I go ahead and type in something wrong here, like admin1 in the username, and try to click on login, the attempts counter is decremented, and at the bottom you'll also notice that it says incorrect credentials entered. Okay, so I keep doing this, and once it reaches 0, the button gets disabled and I can no longer log in. Okay, so you can see that the app is working completely fine. Now there is one thing that you can also do. So you can see that here I have set the string for the username and the password. Now in case it might happen that someone when they write the code, they might go ahead and change the value of this particular variable. So in case someone just does username equals something else, then you basically won't get to know that, right? So the best thing you can do when you basically have some variables which you don't want to change is you can call it as final. Okay, private final, what it does is private, as I told you, it makes sure that this particular string cannot be accessed from any other file, and final means that the value of this particular variable cannot change. Now if I go ahead and try to change it in my code, saying username is equal to admin 2 or 1, then you will see that it throws an error. It basically says that I cannot assign a value. So to ensure that no one changes the value of a variable, you can change it to final. Hello guys, so the code that I've, and another thing before we wind up with this video is I have all the code hosted on this particular repository of mine, and I'll be giving the link of this particular repository in the description box below, so you can go ahead and check it out. The code of this particular video is in the episode 1 folder, so you can go ahead and run it in Android Studio so to view all the files. Okay, having said that, in the next video, the episode 2, will be looking at how you can use classes to store the credentials and then do the validation from the classes. So if you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and also do not forget to leave your comments in the comment section below. Let me know what you think of this video, what topics you want to learn next, and also what things could be improved, and definitely I'll try to incorporate it in the next video. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel and also hit the bell notification icon so that you can get notified on my newest releases. And I have created my new Instagram profile for all things related to Professor DK, so make sure you give it a follow for all the behind the scenes and the latest updates on the newest releases. I have all the links in the description box below, so go ahead and follow me there. So that's all for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and until the next video, happy learning.